Namaste. Welcome to the Hindu Parenting Podcast. From time to time, we feature stories of people and the Sanatan identity. Today, let's talk to Bharat, who is a young parent himself. We focus on his journey from an indoctrinated leftist into dharmikta. It is a journey that will give hope to many parents who are wondering if their teen or young adult children will ever find their way back to Dharma. Namaskaram, Bharat Garu. Pleasure to have you here today.
Namo Namaha, Rekha garu. Really, it's my pleasure to be here today. Thank you for the invite.
Wonderful. I'm sure we'll have a meaningful conversation today.
Yeah.
First, tell us a little about your childhood. Was there anything there that gave you a good foundation to keep you safe, to withstand the assaults and bring you back to Dharma when you felt ready?
Yes. So my background is probably a very, very typical background. Middle class family and mom and dad taking care of us, right? And luckily, my mom was not that much into festivities or festivals or anything like that. But my dad definitely was like all in, right? Like he was all about going to temples, and he would invite astrologers, vastu experts home to have some sessions, fun sessions with us, to discuss how the vastu of the house is, or how my astrological future is, or stuff like that, right? Like, so there was that, and then of course he would sometimes wear the Shabarimala mala, go to Kerala, etc., and then he would also play with things like Bhagavad Gita early in the morning, um, and Shiva Stotra on the tape recorder. So lots of dharmikta. Definitely, my dad was involved in, and it definitely impacted me. Slowly but surely, I not only liked all of those things, but also I got my Ishta Devata out of it, which is Lord Shiva. My dad loved Lord Shiva, and we all do. Me and my sister, for example, in our family, right? My mom, of course, but my mom is not again very religious, so that's fine. So yeah, and that was one thing, that having that Ishtadevata, I believe, is one thing that actually helped me in the end to not lose myself completely in the leftism, so to speak. Call it communism, liberalism, leftism, whatever it is, right? But it definitely helped me uh, keep just be rooted and just still be connected to the mothership, so to speak, just not lost in space. Yeah, that was the typical background I had.
So, Bharat Garu, given that you had an Ishtadevata already and you had a fairly dharmic upbringing, I am wondering how you ended up hating India and still hating your identity. Can you just trace that part for us?
Yeah, yeah. First, I would like to also, maybe I missed it earlier, but I would also like to first touch a bit upon how I had such a great background to start off, and then how I ended up being a leftist at all, right? Like, how is that even possible to end up being someone who somewhat, I would say, hated India, sadly, and also hated one's own identity, generally speaking, and being mentally so colonized that you wanted to be white, right? Basically, which is a lot of kids these days, sadly, one way or the other, whether they realize it or not. So, uh, touching upon that history of it, and then I'll come back to the question of how did I make my way back, basically,
Sure.
right? So, firstly, I want to share that my uncle was in USA at the time, when I was like 3 or 5 or something, and it was my dream naturally at the time because of all the praise that's heaped on him at the time, right? That I wanted to be an engineer and go to the US myself as well. So naturally, that's a lot of 90s kids, I suppose, give or take. So I was no different. And naturally, I had to focus on English, and I had to get good grades and all of that. I went to a very good school run by very good guys. But the truth is, like, when I went to school, two things. Two things really happened, right, straight off the bat. One is the religious symbols get wiped off, like the teachers would discourage wearing bottu, or they would discourage from praying to the books before you open them, things like that, like writing Om on the top of the first page. All of these things that I had, great habits, I would say, were first discouraged straight off the bat. So naturally, at 12-year-old, 11-year-old, they're not going to argue back with the teacher, right? If you do, you'll get hit. So I didn't, and I of course stopped doing those. And also, it somewhat informs your decisions over time once you're told that all these things are not like useful, or they're derided by someone in authority or someone you consider your mentor. So naturally, you would think those are bad. So that's what happened to me to start off. And then number one is that. Number two is the syllabus in the textbooks itself, especially the history part, right? Like all of it actually matters because you're not taught like Aryabhatta's inventions or Bhaskaracharya's Leelavati in school. You are instead taught that some Newton or some Pythagoras came up with some theorem, and as though our guys had nothing to do with it, etc., right? With science or math. So there was that aspect to it, and mainly the hit is the biggest in the history, because the history syllabus kind of has the narrative that we guys were no good, pretty much. The impression I got as a kid at 12, 13, as I was going through the syllabus was, hey, we are losers, basically, right? Like anyone just came over, occupied our lands, enslaved our people, and now we are learning this supposedly better language of better human beings than us, so to speak, English. So that was the impression it left on me a little bit, especially as I was going through world history in probably seventh or eighth standards. I saw how Germany also was in a bad state. Very bad example, by the way, Germany, for the specific reason we all know it's bad and known for. But I just want to leave that part out because it's not mentioned in our history book that what exactly Germans did to Jews, right? So we don't know about that. When I was reading world history, I noticed two things. One, our guys did not fight, so to speak, quote unquote, right? Like in the traditional sense, they were fighting through non-violence, we are told, like Gandhiji's peaceful protests and stuff like that. And on the other hand, I see the rise of Germany from how badly they were beaten and treated in the Treaty of Versailles, and they still got back on their feet like within 10 years and started fighting back, and now they are in World War II. And Hitler nearly beat the English to death and bombed London left and right. He did what he did to apparently, uh, save Germany, I suppose, or increase their power. Whatever he did, evil or not, is a separate question. The central point is they fought back, and I actually liked that. And I didn't appreciate the fact that our guys didn't fight back like they did. That's just a 13-year-old kid, by the way. And naturally, that sense of history informed me somehow that we are weak as a
Mhm.
people, and I didn't want to be associated with these set of people at all. It was so bad at one point that I actually went to my mother and told her that, hey, I wish I had been born in Germany. Like, why am I born to you and dad in India? I hate this. Right? That's those were pretty much my words to her in a different language, sure, but essence is the same. And my mother laughingly used to just say, "Sure, sure, in next life, do that. You won't have a wonderful mother like me. I'm sure, and then you'll realize how important or how awesome this is." She would just taunt me back. She wouldn't. Obviously, she didn't have the same level of historical understanding either. She doesn't know what I'm being taught in school every day, and she probably didn't care that much. She just bantered back, and that was that. And then she always knew that I didn't like the poverty in India. I was an idealistic kid. I hated that my people were weak, or at least that's the impression I had, and poor. Again, that's the impression or the fact of that day. So then it begins, right? Like once you hate your identity, you want to be something else. You try to imitate someone else that you actually aspire to be. So naturally, for me, the easiest way to be was like an American or something, right? Because now you're learning English anyway, so you learn that really well, so that you can one day anyway planning to go to America, so you can be an American one day, and you have nothing to do with India anymore. Is the basic outline you draw for yourself as a 13-year-old, and that didn't change until I was 18 or 20 or anything like that. It only got more and more solidified because every time I spoke good English, let's say in college, I was actually recognized for it.
Mm. Mm.
And my dad used to actually tell me that, hey, it's important to talk in your mother tongue as well and all that. But I would actually, out of spite, because he said that, I was thinking he was trying to drag me back or something. I don't know what I was thinking, right? But I actually, out of spite, would refuse to talk to him in the native tongue, right? I would speak to him in English. I told him that, hey, that's the future, and you anyway know it. So why should I speak in any other language other than English, right? So I did all that nastiness. Luckily, my dad didn't hit me for that. He was a nice dad, right? But anyway, maybe he should have. Who knows? But in retrospect, mainly I was not like a bad kid who was trying to do bad things. It's just that my opinions were informed a certain way, and I was just reacting to that as an idealistic fellow. That's how I see it.
For anyone growing up in India, escaping the clutches of the education system we have and turning to dharma can be as difficult as, the proverbial approach to escape velocity and freeing oneself from the gravity, which keeps us sort of orbiting and pulling us back into the old Hindu hating ways. Given that, and given that you already spoke of your mothership, the connection to the mothership, can you tell us what was the first step in your journey back? How did you even wake up to realize there's more to Dharma or to Hinduism than what you'd been taught in school and college?
I went to US one day and I met the original, namely the American, right? The typical American, they have a different accent, we have a different accent. I tried to learn it. I realized that it's difficult after you reach a certain age, especially after your 20s. There's almost a zero chance that you'll actually catch on the accent, right? Because the vocal cords have already grown a certain way by that time frame. So it's not possible. So you do the next best thing. You try to learn a few words and pronunciations here and there. You try to acclimatize to the new reality and all that, and then you realize that in pockets, at least of the US, you'll be treated as a second grade citizen for the language you speak, give or take.
Mm.
You're not treated as a native American, right? So that always hurt me a little bit, naturally, because I'm trying to be an American and I cannot. So now I am neither Indian, neither wanting to be Indian, nor can I be an American, and now I am stuck in no man's land with second grade status, so to speak, right? But then I was like okay with even that probably at some point, and then I was like, fine, yeah, it is what it is. My kids will have a better future, which is probably everyone thinks anyway. And I went on with my life, and then one day I realized that me being on H1B, the work visa that I had, ensures that I'll pretty much die on H1B and never get a green card, which is a permanent resident visa in the US. And there's like a long backlog. They have a country cap for all countries at 7%. Some nonsensical law they intentionally made to ensure that you are a perpetual temporary worker,
Mhm.
so that you can neither leave nor be stay here. It's like that limbo state where you just keep working for them, right? The typical American, so to speak, slavery mindset where there was a time when they got the blacks to do all the physical hard work, and then now they just wanted someone from India to come and do all their IT work without having to give them citizenship if they can avoid it, right? So that's basically how I thought of it anyway.
Mhm.
And one day when I realized that, then I realized the importance of my connection to India, because India is the only country ultimately that will take me, right? If push comes to shove, that is, like, if I don't have a visa, and my visa also the temporary work visa, it's only useful as long as I'm actually able to go to work tomorrow. If I say, hey, I don't want to go to work to this company, then it involves like a ton of legal process to actually move away from that company, for one thing, and it also involves some amount of risk. So essentially, it made me feel a little trapped here and in the US. And then I was like not feeling American, obviously. And then I felt like India is definitely the better route to go. And as soon as I felt that, I got betrayed because I wish I had known about this green card backlog 10 years before, right? So that I could have made an informed decision. And I felt definitely trapped, and I felt like India is the way to go. And then I decided, okay, now that whatever happened has happened, we can't change that. But what needs to happen going forward is I stop speaking English to the extent I can, and I once again start to connect with my motherland through language. And that's where the journey actually began. Like slowly I started to watch news of India. Until then I wouldn't care for news in India. I was American in the head, right? So I was only watching news of America. I would see political stuff only of America and all that. So now once I started to see what's happening in India and stuff, then I was slowly realizing, one after another, luckily, I started to see like great people. I would like to mention a few, right? Like that informed my decisions over time. One is Sadhguru. Uh, I'll mention him because he was the one of the first ones who mentioned this interesting piece that your mind tries to always protect your identity. Like if you think you are a certain person, right? Like Indian, for example, then that's the identity your mind tries to always protect. Like whatever you actions you take, it'll always be based on that. Similarly, he also in through his debates with various people on TV, he showed me new perspectives to seeing India and Bharatiyata. That's something that I never saw before. Like the Jallikattu, I think, debate that was happening in Tamil Nadu at one point, or the Shabarimala verdict that came out, and he was in Youth for Truth uh, debates with Nalsar students in Hyderabad, I think, some law school. They were debating him left and right about the Shabarimala allowing women or not aspect of it. And he gave it his full might. I think he valiantly defended, but somehow to my leftist mind, it was still not enough. I still wanted more concrete evidence to prove the correctness of Shabarimala's rules itself. But luckily, that's when I found J. Sai Deepak, because he was a lawyer who fought for the temple's rules, right? And he gave the perfect answers, like why Shabarimala has those rules and regulations. And it made a lot of sense to me. And then it hit me that all the leftist media has consuming for so long, whether it is on social media or whether it is on the mainstream media, they were all fooling us. Because not one person on the mainstream media actually gave Sai Deepak's voice that much importance, even though they should have. All the Quint media and that media and this media, all the little videos they make that are easily consumable for us, especially English speakers, they were all not informing the truth. And then I started to realize that there is a lot more hidden agenda behind that's not allowing truth to come out for Hindus to see, right? And then luckily I met Ami Ganatra, not in person, but generally speaking on YouTube videos and stuff, where she was debunking all the myths around Ramayana and Mahabharata. And that helped me a lot because that was another talking point for a lot of leftist kids, right? Like how Rama was not a great husband or all that typical nonsense that they spew on us. And she gave solid answers to those. She gave full context to it and all the answers that I expected. And it made a lot of sense. And that's when I learned more about Rama and Mahabharata, Sanatan Dharma. I, in fact, did not even know that Hinduism's actual name was Sanatan Dharma until like I met maybe Amiganatra or someone like that, right? Like at the end of the day, we just call it Hinduism or something, and that's it. But Sanatan Dharma is a great name and it has a great meaning. Sadly, our kids don't know even the name, right? So we should first introduce them to the name, I think, and then they should also know the meaning. That would help significantly. But anyway, so Ami Ganatra. So all these people, as I continue to watch their content and continue to follow various people that are related to them, uh, finally showed me the truth of it, that Bharatiya civilization, in one word, is like the greatest of all time. There is even no debate or comparison. It's just too good. Yeah, the sad part is that nobody knows that. But anyways, I mean, very few people know that.
As I see it, the value in your story is that you remember being 13, 14, 15. You've given us a very good picture into what actually plays out in the mind of a child that age, because most of us tend to forget that. And unless you remember that, uh, you don't see things quite as clearly. And so thank you for giving a glimpse into how you felt and thought and what impressions were left on your sensitive mind at that age. If you could go back in time and talk to your 15-year-old self, let's say, what would you tell that kid now, knowing what you know today?
Yeah. So, two aspects I'll cover, right? One is the poverty aspect, and the other is the weakness aspect, because those are the two that hurt that 15-year-old kid, apparently, right? So, as far as the weakness aspect, first of all, a lot of people don't know that Hindus or Bharatiya civilization is literally the only old civilization that still remains. Whereas pretty much all the North Americans, for example, right, like Red Indians as they were called, Native Americans as they're now called, they pretty much got wiped out. Egyptians, they got wiped out. Persians, where are they, right? Like in Iran, like probably a minority, and some are in India through Parsis. But that's it, right? Like there's no thriving culture, civilizational continuity, sort of the way Hindus have been able to keep. Um, and that aspect, a lot of people discount for whatever reason. Number one thing that I would say is that we survived the 1,000-year invasions, and we not only survived them, but we're also coming back up once again. Especially in the last 10 years, there's a hell of a lot of improvement in how India is seen, right? We are growing very fast, have very high GDP, and all of that good stuff. We're great in tech, quite successful everywhere. Now, having said that, one statistic I would throw at that 15-year-old kid, that he won't be able to escape but to admit the truth. It is that for the Middle Eastern invasions, when they first started around the 600 AD, between 640 and 712 AD, they conquered pretty much everything around them. They pretty much finished off Persians and Egyptians and converted them, etc., and all that, right? Like they finished parts of Spain, or probably fully. Of course, they got beaten back after the Crusades, but that's different story. But generally speaking, um, Middle Eastern invasions have been at their peak between 640 and 712, and 712 AD is when they were first able to get a foothold in Bharat mainland, as in especially Sindh specifically, right? That too, I think after the sixth attempt or something, they were able to succeed. That too because of various other factors. There were many factors towards the defeat at that point in 712. But anyway, regardless, history is that. And it took them only 50 years or 60 years to do all of that havoc with various other cultures, and they're all wiped off. But when it came to India, between 712 AD in Sindh, their success, and the establishing of Delhi Sultanate in some 1200, it took them 500 years. Compare that, right? Like with 50 years for everything else versus 500 years just to make that journey from Sindh to Delhi. That's it, just some 500 kilometers or something, I don't know. So how much resistance our guys actually gave, how many wars they fought, how many movements they came up with. They destroyed all the temples in those 1,000 years, and our guys built them back every single time. All the temples you see upwards of the Vindhyas, frankly, are all pretty much rebuilt ones. They are not the originals, a lot of them at least. And we're still rebuilding, right? The Ram Mandir, for example, still rebuilding. And some of them are still being taken. They'll rebuild those, I'm sure. So my point is that our guys gave a significant fight. They came up with solutions. A lot of times our guys will bash, a leftist would bash like child marriage, for example, right? I also did that. I was like, why would you guys do that? Are you not like intelligent? Why would you marry off a child? And then the answer is in the fact that you don't know about the history of the invasions. During the invasions, they would actually attack the little ones too, sadly, the women and the little ones. They would either enslave them and parcel them to Central Asia, or they would enslave them like within the Bharatiya mainland. So either ways, it was not a good time for women, and it made sense at the time. Either you had to go with the evil of childhood marriage, or you had to live with the fact that the child would be unprotected for 20 years or so. And our guys just chose to survive first before they can thrive, right? And they did that successfully, the way I see it. If not, they would have been wiped out. So bhakti movement, that is another they came up with. And then when the time was really bad, like Vijayanagara Empire rose in the below the Vindhyas, right? And then when that fell, the Marathas rose up in the 1600s. Somehow or the other, they kept the battle going on. And yeah, even at the stage of the last battle that the Marathas lost was probably in 1818 to the British, right? And then and then they actually still kept fighting, and that's when the 1857 War of Indian Independence happened. And even when that got crushed, they didn't give up. They would still bomb the British officers left and right whenever possible. They would shoot them or something, right? They kept fighting and fighting, which culminated finally in 1947, where there was a naval mutiny, and the British had to leave actually some 6 months or 1 year earlier than they wanted to. And then the only sad part is that the freedom negotiators got into power rather than the nationalists like Subhash Chandra Bose. It is what it is. But either ways, and even then, when certain type of people got the power and they tried to impose socialism on the country and all that, they still survived, and then finally we now have Modi. So that's a good thing. And now we are thriving again. So good days are still ahead. And the important thing is, just to give a short snapshot for that kid, remember that no civilization would have survived a 1,000 year onslaught. It's practically impossible, and still our guys did it, and they continue to fight the long war. Yeah, we just don't know it, but there is still an ongoing onslaught in the form of financial colonization. And a lot of people know British colonialism like until the 1947, right? They think they got the freedom and all that. But no, the truth is, as it turns out, I learned from Ankit Shah, by the way. That's another person who informed my opinions in the last couple years. A great guy. Everyone should follow him, I think. But he opened my eyes to the concept of financial colonization by the Western powers, right? So basically, what they would do is they would ensure that there's always neighboring countries that will keep fighting with each other, like India, Pakistan, China, India, China, Taiwan, or Ukraine, Russia. There's always like hotspots they'll create, and then this will ensure that the neighboring countries can never trust each other enough that they can trade in their own currencies, in their own respective currencies. Instead, they'll have to rely on the dollar or the pound or the euro to trade with each other. And what that does is, if you have to buy something, if you have to buy something from China, you have to go buy dollars first with real money. Whereas US just gets to print money because they are the reserve currency of the world, and the gold standard that was there until 1971 is not there anymore. So ever since they've been off the gold standard, they've been printing money left and right. Anyone gets challenged, Anyone challenges them on this will either have to face war or protests or some form of accusation that they are dictators, and they'll do regime changes through CIA or war or whatever else methods they have. And they always will continue to have control over other countries' politics and whatnot through media control, or because they have the money, right? They can just print and give hundreds of dollars to anybody and ensure that they work for these guys' interests rather than the original country's interests. So we are still fighting that for the last many years. So the war is not over yet, but the 15-year-old should know at least this much, that our guys are still fighting, which is incredible. Yeah.
The point that stands out for me in what you said is the fact that this civilization reinvented itself in various ways. But what our children are told is just the worst of us, and they are shown the best of other civilizations. For
Yeah.
example, I didn't quite realize that we are not even told about the German history with the Holocaust. And
Yes.
we are just told the miraculous story of how Germany reinvented itself after the World War.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. I didn't realize it till you mentioned it, actually. But
Mm.
no wonder. I mean, these little things, they do add up in a child's brain. And parents don't actually realize the deep impressions that children are taking away from all these things that are told to them. One thing is shown to them, and then um, other civilizations are glorified, and we are only spoken about in terms of child marriage and sati and superstition,
Mm.
as if there was only good stuff everywhere else and only bad stuff that existed here.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a great point to remember. And
Mm.
I think parents also need to realize that things do make a very deep impression on children. And children are thinking about these little things and trying to connect the dots. So, whatever you listen from here, this podcast, and whatever it is that appeals to you, find the time and make the effort to package it in a very child friendly way and to have these conversations at different levels. So, to the parents listening, Bharat Karu, can you tell them a few things that they can do to make it easy for their children to find their way back?
Yes, yes. Finding a way back, to be very honest, to reach that escape velocity, I fear is bloody difficult because
Okay.
one will need to have lots of curiosity to actually learn all these things after you're an adult or after you've already studied it in some format or in school or something, right? And once and if you're a confident person, if you're an intelligent person, usually, well, it's even more difficult, frankly, because now your identity as an intelligent person will refuse to give up in a debate. Not many debate in good spirit, right? Like they want to win more than they want to learn. So invariably, the more intelligent you are, the likelihood of you getting something from the other side is lesser and lesser. But anyway, the couple things, right? One, as parents, try to use the original words. Don't use Hinduism, right? Ask yourself, in fact, when it comes to names or religions, why Christianity gets to be Christianity, the tattva of Christian, so to speak, right? The Christianity, whereas Hinduism gets to be ism. Ism is more of a extreme type of behavior. That's when someone gets an ism suffix, like extremism, terrorism. These are all things people do without a mind. That is why they name it as ism, so to speak, right? It's a derogatory suffix, the way I see it at least. So you'll see how all the Eastern stuff is labeled ism, and all the Western stuff, especially Christianity, gets a nice name. Just as an example out there, how things work as far as even words importance is there, right? Number two, Hinduism has no meaning per se. It's just a name given by some foreigners. Whereas every word that is constructed in the Bharatiyata is having etymological significance. Etymology is like the study of root words and all that for any language. And I was luckily I went through the GRE and whatnot because I had to write GRE to get to masters in US, right? So as part of that GRE preparation, I came across like the concept of etymology, wherein you understand root words to figure out the original word's meaning. And like if you know that bene is like good, then benediction, you understand what it's about, right? Like it's a good word sort of. Or male is usually bad, so that's the root word. So maleficent becomes a bad one. So like that, that's how etymology was. So similarly in Bharatiya languages as well, if you use the correct words, they are all having root words in Sanskritam, and you'll always know the correct words. Like for example, instead of Hinduism, if you use Sanatan Dharma, you will understand that based on the definitions, based on the dhatus, the root words as they call dhatus, you will understand what it roughly translates to is eternal sustainability. And then that will inform the kid that everything we do is not seen from a lens of right or wrong. It's seen from a lens of, is this sustainable or not? So the simple act of hitting a kid, for example, right? A communist or a leftist will see it as, oh, you're hitting the kid, you're a bad person. That's it. There's not much to discuss there. And most idealists will probably immediately agree with them, right? It's easy. It's an easy choice to agree. And that is how they make idealistic people wear like this oppressor oppressed lens, and easily convert most idealist kids into communism or leftism, right? But I detract the importance of root words, right? So Sanatan Dharma, when I first learned that it's like about sustainability and all that, it all made sense. Like even child marriage makes sense at that point. Like you have to choose sustainability over everything else. Though these are the parameters in which you live, so you have to make your choice, right? It's not about idealism; it's about practicality. So that is how I think one good way to get a kid back could be first of all the language, purify it, get back to the original words, try to understand the words, and then everything else perhaps eventually will be self-explanatory. That is one, but the other thing is like stating real hard facts, like the 500-year journey of Middle Eastern invasions from Sindh to Delhi, right? That's a statistic that hit me very hard when I first heard it. I think I heard it from I could be wrong, but Meenakshi Jain, I think her name is, brilliant historian, and I occasionally see her videos as well, and I think she made that point. But it's of some serious statistical significance, and it's something that you cannot argue your way out of. And given that, right, the backing of statistics, it's easier to argue with anyone, or rather debate with anyone, and get your point across. So those are like two things I would start off with. For any kid who is affected by leftism, you should also be um, uh, considerate about their situation. Essentially, they are brainwashed, and there's a reason why it's called a brainwash. You lost your brain in it, right, so to speak. So once you're brainwashed, how do you get it back, right? It's nearly impossible. I recognize that. I spoke to some of the as soon as I learned a lot of these things, I tried my best to wake up a lot of people, right? Because generally speaking, I am a good debater, frankly, in my own opinion at least. And I believe in what I say, right? So natural, and that comes across. And despite all of that, people wouldn't believe me. Like when I say, "Hey, we are the greatest civilization, we're the oldest ones, we survived all this, so naturally we are awesome and all that," and I say Sanatan Dharma, here's the definition, identity. It's really difficult to convince people. Especially once they're indoctrinated and brainwashed, it's very difficult to bring them back. But there's definitely scope for some wherein you can throw a few stats in there, like I mentioned a few, the 500 years ones and all that. And the other thing you can definitely do is find a mentor for your kid who knows what I mentioned, who knows. Um, my journey, for example, that I explained, right? Like wherein I learned all this history and context and current context, and then that helped me like solidify the ground I'm standing on in terms of the truth of it, right? It makes a lot of difference, especially if today's kids, they're very very logical. They are seeking explanation. I don't see them as that's another dichotomy, right? They're also brainwashed, at the same time they're also logical. You might wonder how what is this guy saying, right? It is actually the truth. Like in my case, I was a very logical person right from the beginning. I'm an engineer actually. I code for life for survival, right? So how is it that I got brainwashed? Because there's a lack of data, lack of mentorship in a certain direction. Especially history is one that we don't bother. In fact, my own mother, right, when I once told her that my favorite subject was history, she didn't discourage me, but in her own way she ma- made a joke out of it, saying that, hey, if you really love history so much, then you should consider becoming a lecturer. And there won't be a lot of money in it, but hey, at least you'll get to do what you like, she said. And I know how she said it, right? She was not saying it like in a really nice way. So, not that it was changed anything, frankly, but just a fun story, right? So, the point is like Bharatiya parents do not take history seriously. That is the point I'm trying to drive here. Like everybody wants their kid to be the next math genius or something, right? Or science genius, doctor,
When
whatnot,
the
not
actual
history.
battles are being fought elsewhere, right?
Exactly.
In history or subjects like those. And
Hmm.
this is again a very very important point that I think parents absolutely need to recognize that
Yeah.
while we are earning a livelihood and appreciating math and science, which is a very good thing, it's a very good thing. It's intellectually stimulating. It's useful, but the actual battle for survival, if your
Hmm.
future generations need to survive, then the actual battle is being fought in law, in journalism, in
Yeah.
history, and all these subjects. They're not just faltu subjects. They are
Yeah.
very important for our safety and well-being in the future and even today. So,
Mhm.
great point.
And in fact, I work for a top company here in the US. I won't mention the name, but let me just say this. When I once met the leadership in that top company, all of them were pretty much Bharatiyas, for one thing. For another, all of them were extremely smart people. Like, I couldn't believe the level of IQ in that room for a second there, right? As we were debating issues. Something that you don't get to have that many awesome people in one place, right? And I really felt they were all problem solvers. And for a minute there, I really felt bad for me because I was a woken up Hindu and I didn't see the others as such. And it broke my heart that all this high IQ spent on like useless things, so to speak, like some technological improvement of some kind, so to speak, right? While our guys are fighting like 1,000 year warfare, some of the most intelligent ones are being used for forming some tech or something for someone else, which will be used against the very own people who are the very people who actually created that tech. That is the craziness of it, right? These guys problem solve all this, and then the AI or whatever it is that's being formed, it will be used against them through chat GPT's bad answers when it comes to Hinduism or about India, spreading fake news, all of this, right? Like it'll come back to bite us. So I just felt very strange in that room. So that is why I say history is very important, because if you actually know history, perhaps you won't consider making that choice of working for somebody who is going to hurt you in the long run, right? Or your kids for that matter. Who knows? But anyway, so that is one aspect of it.
Sure, yeah, yeah. I want to ask you if you'd ever been the object of conversion, of an attempted conversion. Now, that should be an interesting story.
Yes, definitely, definitely. I was in a school run by Brahmins, as it turns out. they were not particular about the caste or anything, but the fact is that they were Brahmins, right? And very smart people, really nice people, perfect people, all of that, but also very secular, like most of us. And as it turns out, they also accepted kids from other religions, as is the norm. And one kid happened to be of a particular religion, and uh, that kid was actually a little older than us. When I was in my seventh standard, I was probably 12, and that boy was probably some 16 or 17. I don't know the context of why he got accepted at all, or why he got accepted into seventh standard with other younger kids. But either ways, that kid had a penchant for debating with the younger kids, rather in this case his classmates. And he would debate constantly how Pakistan is great, or Pakistan actually won certain wars, and how certain religion is actually better than the other religions, etc. And being kids, we don't have the same amount of data or expertise to tackle that. And this is not something that we will go to our teacher and say, because if I go to my teacher and complain that, hey, this guy is saying this, the first slap will be on my cheek, because why are you talking with that fellow on this subject, right? And then what happens to him, we don't know whether he'll actually get punished or whatnot, right? And we are anyway enjoying the debate at that point, so why not? So there are multiple problems there, but the central point is, one, he would do that, which makes us feel bad in the end, because we would invariably lose the debate because we don't have the data to back our side. Number two is, because we are secular and we believe all gods are one and all of that, right? So what that does is, for us, their god is just one more god. It's not a big deal for us to accept one more. But the catch is, as far as he is concerned, there is only one god. That's it, and that god's name is also very specific. You cannot say Lord Shiva is also a god and then the other person's god is also a god. It's not possible as far as he's concerned. So, but we don't know all that. So, what he does is, one, he'll make us feel bad about being ourselves. Number two, by getting us into debates and stuff, right? Number two is like, he would offer solutions after raising the problem. He would say, oh, if you want to pass this exam, then I'll give you a mantra and you can read that, you can chant that, and you will become successful, right? Which is a typical thing that we do anyway. Mantras and stuff actually are good for us. But the fun thing is, what he's saying are not mantras. They're just lines from religious books of foreign origin. So we don't realize this, because when we chant mantras, we don't know the meanings anyway. How is that different from saying some Arabic or some Latin words from a different religious book, right? So for us, it's all the same. So we'll just chant whatever he says. So at one point, I actually did chant some of those and all that, or say those or memorize those. And after some time, I still had my Ishta Devata as Lord Shiva. So I
And
couldn't let
all
go
this,
of that anyway.
just to all this, your parents don't know, right? Never knew and probably still don't know.
Probably no, there's still nobody knows actually. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe this is the first time revealing it. At best, maybe I told my wife once, so that was that. Yeah. So yeah, it was a very short story. It was not that significant for me at that point in life, as it turns out. But now that I know about the Thousand-Year War and why that's happening, the pyramid scheme style growth of certain religions, how they ensure conversion is like a big part of their growth. These once all these things came to light for me, essentially understanding who are we fighting for 1,000 years exactly, right? Once we know the answer to that question, then we ask, why are they fighting this 1,000-year war? And these answers came slowly to light for me, especially when I was when there was an attempt to convert me to Christianity. Actually, later in life, when I was 25 in the US, I was living with a very good Christian family, But before I go there, let me just wrap up the thing about the other conversion, right? So this kid tried to convert me and all that, and once I couldn't let go of Lord Shiva, so I would once again just do my prayers and all that, and he didn't appreciate it. And once he didn't, he took up another kid as his mentee, and then he would make him do something nasty to me, hit me on the way out or something like that, and stuff like that he would just do, right? And I didn't understand why he hated me suddenly. Like, what's the big deal? I just didn't do a couple things that he wanted me to do. I didn't hurt him, but it didn't matter. He hated me, and that was the end of that chapter, pretty much as far as I was concerned. I just ignored him and moved on, and nothing else happened. But later in life, I realized basically it was an attempted conversion, basically, right, for a young kid. So luckily, my Ishta protected me that day. And then coming to Colorado, much later, a decade and a half later, right, give or take. Um, I was 25. I was living with a Christian family as a tenant, and they were really, really nice people. Some of the best I've met, and they were really like hardcore Christian, and they saw a good person in me, and they wanted to quote unquote save me, right? So essentially, trying to convert me to Christianity. So they would ask me like, "Who do you believe? Do you have a conversation with your God? How does that work?" and all of that. Just asking basic question, and then they would say, have you heard of Jesus Christ? What do you think? He's the savior and all of that. And it's very innocuous. They didn't like force anything on me or anything like that, but they just included me in all their going to church and stuff like that, right? Like for a few weeks. And every time they would tell me about Christianity, they would also tell me about Hinduism. They would say that ours is a bad religion, and all the gods that I'm calling gods are actually devils and stuff like that. I was always like surprised, why do they think that our guys are like Satan or devil, right? And then I would ask them actually, like, what informs your opinion that Lord Shiva is a Satan or devil? To that they say it's in the Bible, something to that extent. And obviously I'm not a good reader, or I had no intention of reading too much. Never read anything much, so I was not going to go read the Bible to figure this out. So I went to YouTube instead, the next best thing, and found a few research guys and saw a few videos of Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, and maybe even a little bit of Bill Maher, even though he's like a solid leftist. But anyways, so I saw their works and their debates with some Christian pastors and whatnot, and that informed my opinion a little bit. I confirmed that through my discussions with this family as well. Basically, for them, it is true that as far as they are concerned, they think that our gods are devils, and they believe in one life, and they actually think that after this life there's only one question to answer, and that is whether you believed in Jesus Christ or not. There is no question of whether you are a good person or not. There's only one question where because Jesus already died for your sins, right, basically. So the question is like, do you believe him or not? If you believe him, you're ridding yourself of all sins. If you don't believe him, you keep on the sins, so you go to eternal hell. So the question is, do you want to go to eternal heaven by believing, or do you want to go to eternal hell by not believing? Very simple question. And if you say no, what that translates to them is, you're staying Hindu, you're not going to believe in Jesus Christ, which means your their kid is actually more endangered by me, a good Hindu, thanks to my beliefs, than from a child molester who is actually a Christian, because that child molester will only hurt their kid in this life, and that's it. She or he would still go on to become part of the eternal heaven because she believes in Jesus Christ still. But if that kid is influenced by me, a good Hindu, then what that means is she's going to eternal hell. So I am the more dangerous one as far as that family was concerned, right? As a good Hindu. So this understanding I got only after I went through that process of someone trying to convert me and all that. And my response to all of that was, I got a Om tattoo right after all these debates, and I showed them the Om tattoo on my shoulder. because I was always a rebel, right? So I had to do something crazy. So I got a tattoo. So that was my story about my tryst with conversions.
It sounds like you had a very dharmic background, and also you were interested in things like astrology, Vastu, and other things. But you continued to um, maintain your skepticism of all things Hindu at the same time. And you never really liked your identity. You hated India. How do you reconcile these two different aspects of your personality?
Yeah, this one is going to be the toughest to explain, but I'm going to give it a shot, right? One is thanks to my dad's influence, I was introduced to a ton of these things: Vastu, astrology, bhakti, bhajan, wearing malas, celebrating festival. All of that I was introduced to. Thank my father for that. But unfortunately, a couple things happened, right? One, in school, you're taught Aryan invasion theory. That is number one. And me being south of the Vindhyas, I was doubtful, who am I exactly? Am I Aryan or am I Dravidian? And if I and somebody once told me, "Hey, Lord Shiva is an Aryan god," and I was like, "Wait a second, but I love that guy. I don't want him to be somebody else, right? I want him to be who I or related to me." And it partially broke my heart, that young heart of 13 years or something. But it didn't matter. Luckily, he was still my ishta. It didn't matter. Thank the gods once again, right? Like Lord Shiva especially. And later in life, I realized, of course, that Aryan invasion theory is all just nonsense concocted up by the British, right, to take credit for all great things of Bharat, like the language. Sanskritam, for example, they claim it's Aryan, but it's not. It's Bharatiya. That's it. But anyway, so at that point, one problem was the Aryan invasion theory, where all good things were still part of not India. That is the central idea, right? Vastu, astrology, we are told even by communist people, even now, like in the media. I heard very recently one person say, oh, astrology was Greek, it's not Indian. Indians later took it up and all that, essentially reversing uh, who is the mother and who is the child, right? Weirdly. But anyways, so there is that aspect to it, wherein credit is not given to India. So still, I have nothing to feel great about India as a consequence. Even if I did, another problem is my central point still remains. Maybe there were some great people. Even if I give you that back in the day, right? You're still a poor country. You're still a weak country because you lost so many wars. That is still the narrative that would play in the head. So none of the aspects that we mentioned, right? Vastu, astrology, yoga, and even now there is still like active campaign going on in the social media where all these things are given a secular tint to it, wherein unless the first of all, unless the white person actually approves that this is good, it's not. So there is that mental colonized problem for our kids. Another is like only when they approve it, then somehow this becomes correct. And number two is like um, we are not taught it from a young age, and we are not associating it with the Hindu identity. Yoga is never associated with religion, and you still, or India for that matter, right? So, from that standpoint as well, it falls short of helping you form a good look for yourself in terms of identity.
Yeah, that's a difficult one to explain actually, because I also know um, so many absolutely dharmic people on the surface. At least people who believe in all kinds of rituals, they'll do everything. But
Hmm.
at the same time, it's almost like a schizophrenic split personality. On another side, they are busy doing things to undermine Dharma itself and
Hmm.
to insist that Hinduism is not good, and to but anyway, that's a topic for another day. Let's come back to, what would you say to a young person today who who is asking you, why should I be interested in Dharma? What's in it for me?
So throughout this podcast, I focus completely on identity to the extent I can and how it informed a lot of my decision making. And to that kid, I would say, number one, you should care about dharma because it is belonging to your ancestors and it's tied to your identity. So number one, at least know what it is, right? That is the minimum you can do to help yourself, not someone else, right? Because whether you like it or not, some if you tell I have nothing to do with dharma, sure, you're probably fine inside the confines of your house. But once you get out, somebody is bound to say that, hey, here's a Hindu, he's walking around. He does something called dharma. Apparently, it's bad. So now what do you do? So you also have to care about what others see in you, right? So from that standpoint, you still are better off knowing what you are or who you are. And for your own self-esteem and self-respect, you have to know your stuff. So that's number one. Number two is, if you understand the concept of Sanatan Dharma essentially being roughly translated to eternal sustenance or eternal sustainability, then you'll see the importance of such an idea. The importance of the idea is that which system do you want your kids to live in as the world goes forward? Would you want to live in a world where everybody is cared for, or would you want to live in a world where it's all Matsya Nyaya, as in the big fish eats the small fish? I would like to think any logical person would come to the conclusion I don't want to risk it. Maybe my kid is intelligent, but who knows? Maybe you won't get lucky, right? So it's better not to wish for the Matsya Nyaya going around. It's better to wish for Sanatan Dharma, the eternal sustainability idea going around, so that everybody has a chance to thrive in whatever circumstance. So from that standpoint, you should, given that everybody cares for their kids, I would like to think any logical person will come to the conclusion that this is the better idea. Number one. Number two is, if you somehow tell me that I don't care about my kids or their progeny, that's all too far in the future, none of this matters, then I would invoke the question of, do you believe in the concept of karma? And if the answer is no, to such a person, I have only one thing to say, which is, if you ignoring karma is like ignoring gravity. You do it at your own risk. You jump off the building and you see what gravity is, right? You can't deny it when you're falling down. Similarly, karma will always find a way to come back to you, good or bad. And it's better if you do good deeds for your own self, not for someone else, right? Like for your own self, it's good if you do something good. And number two is, like, if you say, and naturally from this karma theory, it follows that you cannot finish all your karmas within the same lifetime. It's not possible, or it's not normal. They will follow you through to the next life. That is another aspect, rebirth, punarjanma, right? Like that we believe in sanatan dharma. It makes complete sense as far as I'm concerned, from where I see what the karma theory is trying to tell us, right? And my personal experience with karma itself, whenever I do something bad, it follows me. Whenever I do something good also, I noticed it follows me. So that's my personal experience, and I can't talk about others. So from that standpoint, it's good for yourself if you believe in Sanatan Dharma and if you spread Sanatan Dharma, so that when you come back in the next life, you won't be stuck in some adharmic place. Instead, perhaps you would have done enough, or we would all collectively have done enough, so that we will end up in a dharmic place where everybody gets a chance to live in peace. So, from both those standpoints, understanding karma, dharma, understanding the importance of self respect and self esteem for anyone, I think Sanatan Dharma is very, very important. And lastly, I would say our guys already came up with a great line so that we can remember this easily. All the stuff I said, Dharma Rakshati Rakshita. If you save Dharma, Dharma will save you. It's a very natural consequence given the way I put it, right? And lastly, I would like to touch upon the alternate. The alternate is the one life concept propagated by other ideologies. And the danger with one life concept is anyone who believes this is it, this is the only life I'm gonna have, they're bound to do some extreme things. Now, how extreme depends on their background, context, knowledge, wisdom, whatnot. But still, they're bound to do some crazy things that they would otherwise not do. And that is why I think one life concept is actually more dangerous. It ensures matsya on some level, because resources are limited anyway on planet Earth, and invariably every human has some amount of desire, some more than others. Naturally, the ones that are more desiring things, more strongly desiring, they will try and capture everything they can in whatever means they can, because hey, one life, right? Gotta do everything you can right now. So I don't want such a system to be there for my own sake. So uh, just want to explore the alternative and show the difference.
Bharat Garu, you have two small children. Can you share with us some of the things you're doing to raise them with more awareness of Hindu Dharma?
Yes. So, firstly, I decided that there won't be any English in the house. That was my first rule. Even before marriage, I told my wife that, hey, if there is like one thing I don't want in the house, it's English. Number two, especially for the kids, right? It's an exception for me because I have to for work, so that's different. Number two, they will have to learn their mother tongue, no questions asked. The first 5 6 years, they speak only in their mother tongue. Luckily, in a way, because my wife is from a different region, they are going to learn two tongues basically, one their mother's and the other mine. Number three, they will also learn Sanskritam, and not only just saying bhajans and shlokas, but they'll actually learn to converse and whatnot. In fact, in everyday life, throughout even my extended family around in the place where I live, I ensured that all the kids speak to some extent a little Sanskritam here and there. A couple of them are actually encouraged to go to a online Sanskritam medium school, Vijayaji's um,
Agastya Gurukulam.
online Gurukulam, Agastya Gurukulam. Thank you. Yeah, yeah, really love that. So Sanskritam, like Namo Namaha, saying in the morning. There's a happy birthday song in Sanskritam, Janma Dinamidam, beautiful song. Every parent should learn. Every Bharati parent should learn and teach their kids. So things like that, right? Wherever I can include Sanskritam, I will. And yoga, of course, once they are like a certain age, I plan to teach them that. And then one other line I did draw even before marriage is like no school for my kid, because I went through school and I don't think they taught me anything that I can call a life skill, so to speak. It was some knowledge, but it actually did a lot of damage to my psyche, that I can probably never undo. Colonizing my head, hating my identity, all of the fell, teaching me fake history, making me wipe off my vibhuti and kumkum, for example. Things like that. Even going through a possible conversion, my God, right? So, a lot of damage could have been done at school and was done at school. So I definitely don't want my kids to have to go through that, right? So no school. If at all, homeschooling, that is one option. Another one is Gurukulam, like the other two kids I was talking about who are going to the online school, right? Or even in person if I have that chance. So right around the time when I was going through this idea of no school for my kid, or only Gurukulam, etc., I came across Rekha Garu's Substack article on Bhagavad Gita having 18 chapters, and how it was divided into different yogas based, like karma yoga, gnana yoga, and bhakti yoga, and how the first 8 years or 6 years of the kid's life, they're supposed to actually enjoy the karma yoga portion of it and not have to be bothered too much by anything else, like learning or anything like that. And you can still learn, but that doesn't have to be the focus like we think it should be. And then they come to Bhakti Yoga, where they learn to celebrate festivals, understand all the Puranas, Itihasas, I suppose. And then they finally come to Gyan Yoga at the age of 12 or so. So, where that can become the focus, not necessarily the starting point. So, that was like eye opening for me in the sense that until then it was only a desire and a theory for me to not send my kids to school too early. But once I saw that article, I was like a little empowered, thinking, okay, this is approved on some level by other dharmikas as well. And I began to follow this Hindu parenting podcast as well. And right around the time I came across Suraj Garu's podcast, where he was talking about Indic calendars and Panchangam and how it ties with the history of Gregorian calendar itself. And I realized how much of a joke it was that Indian Hindu parents actually celebrate birthdays based on Gregorian calendar. And what I did with my kid was like I ensured there was no cake for his birthday. Instead, I celebrated it completely Bharatiya style, like it used to be the case before colonization. And I celebrated it not according to the Gregorian calendar or the English calendar we follow today. I instead used the panchang to figure out like when exactly his birthday is going to be every year, and I celebrated it accordingly. And it was a huge success. We also only sang the Janmadinamidam Sanskritam song for his birthday, not the happy birthday song. So I'm trying to decolonize the experience for my kids, right? Doing all these things. And also, there were some other amazing podcast episodes in Hindu parenting, like the one about Holi, where Neha ji really explained in such a beautiful way that all through my life, I did not think much of Holi in terms of like how awesome it is or anything like that. But once I heard her description of Holi, I was like, God, I must be playing Holi the next time I get a chance. So excited and thrilled the first time I heard all that. And since then I've followed Hindu Parenting Podcast diligently, listening to all the episodes, and each episode is such a gem. And I'm actually surprised that we don't have like millions of viewers already. Frankly, that's how good I think of the content I share with everybody in my circle as well, periodically.
It's so heartening to know that the work we're doing is actually useful to parents like you. Thank you, Bharat Garu, for your steady, unfaltering support and encouragement over the years. It means a lot to us to hear these words from you today. And yes, please continue speaking on what you plan to do with raising your children.
Yes. And I'll of course focus on skills like life skills, whether it is cooking, cleaning, carpentry, plumbing, whatever, right? Like real world skills, farming. These are all the things I want to focus on. And of course, if they are interested in things like law, doctor, or something like that, then of course we have to send them to school, right? But school as in a college. But I will try my best to keep them away, especially when they are younger, when they are susceptible to all these crazy ideas that people sometimes fill them with, and focus on arming them to the teeth before I send them out into the world. That's the least I can do, I think, as a parent, ensuring that if you are going to send your kid to the battleground, at least give him a sword and a shield before you do so, right? So, as far as sending a kid to an educational institution is concerned, that is how I see it. It is a battleground where the system is trying to fight for ownership of the mind space of your kid. So, I definitely believe in arming them first before sending them there.
Arming them
These
with,
are the basic things.
arming them with.
Arming them with history, context, knowledge, mainly these three items, and all that I want specifically them to get out of the educational institution is just that specific certificate they will need in order to practice, right? That's it. I don't want them to have any side agenda protesting for some nonsense or not knowing their background. Sometimes they'll get converted, or whether it is to communism, leftism, or some other ideology that believes in certain things that we do not agree with if we know what it was. So yeah, arming them to the teeth with mainly history and knowledge and context. Yeah.
Great. Would you like to share any final words with us, or maybe a story or two?
Yes, yes. Um, so final words would be for any Bharatiya parent, I would say knowing yourself, knowing your history, understanding your identity, are like foremost and really important things for reasons that I've already enumerated to some extent in this podcast. And also, I want to share like one story that I heard from J. Sai Deepak, the Supreme Court lawyer, when he was in California attending some event, right? And one American Indian kid or Indian American kid asked him a question. She heard all about the Shabarimala story and all of that J. Sai Deepak had to say about the civilizational war that's going on or whatnot. And then she asked an interesting question to him. She asked, all of this is great and fine, I believe what you're saying, but what has it to do with me? I'm an American. That's what she said. To that, his answer was a story about a secular Jew who was once interviewed. And he was asked the same question, like, why do you care about the Orthodox Jew or what happens to him? You don't even consider yourself Jewish, you don't practice Judaism, so what do you have to do with all this, right? And to that, his answer was, I don't see myself as a Jew necessarily when I see myself in the mirror, but Hitler definitely saw a Jew in me. So, the essential point here being that it's not enough for you to somehow imagine you're white or something. You can go to your La La Land and do what you want, I suppose. But the catch is that the other person still sees an Indian in you, a Hindu in you, or a Bharatiya in you, and they would still have some issue with you, give or take, and you better be prepared. And this is where I would want to share another story as to why the other person would have a problem with you in the first place, right? For that, you have to understand what Shatrubodh is. You have to understand what someone believes. And this is my favorite story to share because it's my from my personal experience. My cousin, he broke my head twice when I was a kid. He was a really good person, actually. I would still hug him like if he came to my home right now. Absolutely no bad blood between us. But what happened was I thought it was just an accident, but later in life I realized that it was planned. Like he actually hated me and he actually hurt me with intent. Now, why would he do such a thing if he was a good guy, right? Like, I asked my mother, and my mother finally once told me that it's not because of you, it's because of the history I have with his mother. And I don't share her views with certain things, and as a consequence, she doesn't appreciate what I do or tell. And she fed that to her kid, and of course, her kid hated you, and he did what he did. Now, my complaint to my mother at that point was, you should have told me, because now that I didn't know, I got hurt. What if something worse had happened, right? And at least if you had told me, it's not like it would have made a huge difference. Maybe, who knows? But at least I would have known to wear a helmet when I meet him next time and hug him. So, or an armor like Shivaji Maharaj, so that you're not backstabbed. So my point is knowing what the other person believes, especially how they see you, what they think, what their beliefs are, what the context from which they're coming in. If you don't know that, you're bound to get hurt. So that is my tryst with my cousin anyway. So the other thing I want to share, besides the identity of self and how the other person sees and Shatrubodh, besides that, I want to share that all the stuff that you do for your kids, like religion based stuff, um, it is still not useless. I want you to know that it is still useful because All the things that my dad did not go to waste in the end. Like he prayed Bhagavad Gita every day in the morning, and at least one shloka remained with me. And there was, even if I can't recite the shloka, yeah, there was a question stuck in my head, like, what is Swadharma? And eventually, I learned that accidentally through an article of Ami Ganatraji from her old blog. And it was really great to learn about it because there's a huge debate usually for the last many years. Should a kid follow their passion, or should they follow what they're good at or what they'll make money at, right? Like, and Swadharma actually addresses that question somewhat. That is how I felt when I read Ami Ganatraji's article. She says Swadharma is basically a combination of Prakriti, Samarthya, and Kartavya. So, not just one or the other, it is Prakriti, which is like nature of the person, the innate talents, Samarthya, as in capacity to do those things well, and then Kartavya, wherein the person actually feels like this is his purpose in life, right? Only when all three things come together, it becomes Swadharma, and that's when it's actually that's the sort of activity that would make sense the most for a kid. For me, just listening to that my dad said, and then later, 30 years later in life, somebody writing an article that would help me understand it, and that being useful for my kid was like really big. Otherwise, there was no way I was gonna read that article, right? Like, I would see Swadarma and just swipe out. So doing what you do is still useful. That is another. And I also want to clarify for the listeners, whenever I said I hated my identity or I hated India, it's not like in a bad way. It's more in the sense of, imagine if you really, let's say you have five kids, right? And you love all of them, of course, but you notice that four are like really doing well in school or something like that, and the fifth one is really struggling, and eventually, let's say they become the black sheep of the house or whatnot, and then suddenly you love them, but you also hate them a little bit. It's confusing. So that's the sort of hate I was talking about when I say India. I don't hate, of course. It's just that I loved it. I loved India and Bharat so much that it hurt me, that it was weak or poor, or at least that was a narrative that was sold to me as a kid. It just hurt me. So
Yeah, I
that's
think
it.
we got some very interesting perspectives today. What would you say is the impact on your confidence level? Were you more confident as a, I mean, you are still articulate and everything. It's not necessarily connected to the leftist in you, but you were all of that and you continue to be all of that. But did this realization of what your identity is and your journey into finding it have any impact on your confidence?
It definitely did. I was always a confident kid. I won't discount that. But at the end of the day, once I went through this certain indoctrination of thinking somehow you're lower of some kind or something, right? Thinking of yourself as a second grade citizen in America, for example. So all these things still affected me a little bit in certain contexts, especially when there are certain trigger points, right? And but now that I am actually realizing the truth of it, that hey, I actually belong to the greatest civilization ever there ever was. And what more could I ask for, right? Like, our guys gave it everything, and I feel great. And I now actually don't compare myself to anybody else. I'm very, very, very much at peace with living in my own skin. I don't have to feel white every day in order to feel happy. And it's actually a great feeling of complete liberty and satisfaction. And definitely, I'm much more confident in life than I otherwise would have been if I were just a leftist who still like had trouble with their identity. Yeah.
With that, we come to the end of today's podcast. Thank you, Bharat Garu, for sharing your story with us and shining a light on the path back to Dharma for our listeners. Listeners, if you'd like to share your story about the Sanatan identity, about your path back to Dharma, about anything at all related to Sanatan Dharma, please reach out to us. You can visit hinduparenting.org for the latest articles, reviews, podcasts, and information about classes for teenagers. Subscribe to our newsletter and follow us on Twitter, X, and Instagram at the handle Hindu Parenting. You can also write to us at contact@hinduparenting or leave comments for us. Until next time, namaste.